Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Fish Bytes, the Miami Herald's Miami Marlins podcast. I'm Jordan McPherson. He's Andre Fernandez. I think finally defrosted from his trip back from Buffalo for that Dolphins playoff game. Dre, how are you?
Wait, they're still de-icing me, just like the plane. They're spraying all that stuff, and 50 degrees warmer. That's how I'm doing. I mean, I will say this though, for all the jokes we make about going up to the U.S.'s version of Siberia and Buffalo and all that stuff, we actually caught a pretty good window this weekend to go up there because it was 22 degrees and all of that, but it looked, at least if you were inside and watching that and seeing the game through the press box glass, you would have thought you were in Miami when you looked up. I mean, there was barely a cloud in the sky. It was sunny. It was nice. It's just then you step outside and it's a meat locker. It was like 22, like I said, 22 degrees. But you are the one that went through Siberia.
Slight difference
a few
from
weeks
what I
ago.
went through about a month ago. Yeah,
Right. When I'm looking at you and you look like Jon Snow with the snow in your beard, in your facial hair there, all that stuff, with the little hoodie. Yeah, you went through the worst of it for sure. This wasn't that bad when it comes to that, and it turned out to be a great game, even though they lost, and within one play or two from being one really remarkable upset.
Yeah, but now to shift gears to what we're on this episode about. A lot to talk about from this past week or so since the last time I was on here. Marlins made a bunch of moves. We talked about Jean Segura exclusively last week.
What's happened in the past month and a half or 2 months? I feel like I haven't been on this pod forever, literally since last year. But anything happened while I was gone?
Well, finally, over these last 2 weeks, we finally have had movement since we turned over to the new year. We talked about Jean Segura last week with his signing, his 2-year deal with the 3rd-year option. But since then, the Marlins traded shortstop Miguel Rojas to the Los Angeles Dodgers for infielder prospect Jacob Amaya. They have agreed to terms with veteran pitcher Johnny Cueto. That deal is not official yet, but it's expected to be by the end of the week, and we're expected to be able to meet with Cueto at the ballpark at some point this week. And those are the main 2 things that have happened to this point. They've also had, now that they have Cueto at the starting pitching side, they are figuring out how to get another bat. They ideally want to get at least one more, and that's probably going to come through the trade market. Having Cueto will allow them to sort of play with their pitching depth without having to basically compromise their depth. But we'll get to that in a minute. I want to start off today, especially since he was one of the main voices of this team over these last few years. I want to start with the Miguel Rojas news because, again, Miguel Rojas was heading into the last year of his deal. It was sort of expected that he would get traded at some point this year, whether it was at the deadline or what I thought if he was going to get traded before the season, I thought he was going to be packaged with someone, say a Pablo Lopez or a Trevor Rogers, for one of the big bats, and I say big bat by Marlins standards, to be able to be that little extra incentive to get a big deal done. I did not expect a 1-for-1 with a prospect, but the Marlins ultimately decided that once they signed Jean Segura, that they had what they needed in their infield to do a move that they feel could help them toward the back half of the season. Amaya is a top 15 prospect in the organization for the Marlins now, and played basically all of last year in AAA, so the team feels like Amaya could be a factor toward the end of the season and potentially be that long-term role in shortstop from 2024 and beyond. But even with that, you look at what Miguel Rojas brought to this team. Obviously, we see the on-the-field stuff, the Gold Glove caliber defense, and the bat outside of the end of last season. But what he brought in that clubhouse, he was basically their team captain the last 4 years. And he was that vocal presence. He was the voice of the team. And once you remove him, it's now you need to find somebody not only to replace him at shortstop on the field, but you need to figure out who that voice is going to be in that clubhouse where you have a lot of veteran guys, but not vocal veterans. And you have some vocal guys who are on the younger side, but still haven't fully proven themselves to establish that captain, vocal voice of the team role. So that's a dynamic the Marlins are going to have to figure out as they go through spring training and figure out how they manage that side of the situation as well.
Yeah. I mean, you had Martin Prado for a while, and then Miggy it was like passed the baton to Miggy to be that guy. And yeah, this is there are some veterans on this team. The thing with that is just, like you said, it's so, some of the veterans that are there, it's so transitory because you don't know how long they're going to really be there. And so it's like, I mean, Miggy was the longest tenured 8 years.
8 years.
That's unheard of on this franchise, but even not 8, let's say he's there a few years, so you know a guy's going to be there. That's the whole thing with this franchise. Like, you don't know who's going to be there for a while. And yes, I know in baseball, you don't stay, rarely do you stay with a team a long, long time, unless maybe you're a superstar and locked in. But this team doesn't really have guys that stay longer than 2-3 years most of the time too. So who is that? Who's the new? That's a very good question. And it's something that, realistically looking at this team, they're going to take a lot of lumps because this is still a team in the roughest division in baseball, probably still, and still in the building phase that they're perpetually in. But they're going to be losses, and they're going to be frustrating losses. So who's the guy that keeps it together and keeps the effort going, keeps them at least on that, mindset where you don't start going on your own and thinking about, and it's me, and no, like, that's still keeping that as a team together. Maybe it comes from up top. Maybe it's Skip Schumacher,
Yeah.
and but he's the new guy in class too. He's installing his ways and his personality and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting dynamic to see how that clubhouse is going to look, because I think it's going to be it's going to be different. I don't know what shape it's going to take, but it's definitely going to take the different a noticeably different feel than it has over several years, because I think you had that consistency that went from Prado to Rojas when it came to that, like who the leaders were in that clubhouse before. So, and then, a lot to unpack there. Then going back to just Miggy himself, like, again, we can't say enough. We've gushed about him here for good reason. What a good quality person. Forget about baseball player, but quality person he's been, and to stick with the franchise through one of its roughest patches, really, like that shows you the character too, because he's, and I don't mean that meaning like just the job and being signed to the team. I mean like being the guy that went out there in the community and became the face of the team, really. Like, he was the ambassador of the Marlins. Like, he didn't have to do that, but he took that role. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, the value. And personal note, yes, I wish him the best. When I saw who they were trading him to, I was very happy for him, because not just going back to your roots, which I just did about a year ago. I know that a little bit of that feeling, but for him, a chance to be on a contender. Yeah. And I'm very happy for that. And not to say you're rooting for the Dodgers, but it won't be too bad if at the end of the day, if LAD is up on that World Series scoreboard at the end of the year, I don't think we'll be that upset about it, because we'll know, like, that means Miggy's got a shot at a ring. So that's one thing that I hope, for his sake, he gets a chance to at least play that meaningful baseball that he hasn't been able to, outside of like the one, short season during his tenure with the Marlins.
Yeah, I gotta echo you on that. I mean, I still go back to spring training 2019, right when I was just breaking in on the beat. Miggy was the first guy I did a one-on-one interview with, and at the end of it, after we talked, I think it was about 15 minutes ago, he looked at me and went, "Yeah, let me know whatever you need. I'm here," and all that. And this was when Prado was still here. Prado was still the main vocal guy, and Miggy was still coming into his own, and he wasn't even guaranteed to start in shortstop job at that point. He was still competing with JT Riddle for that, during that spring training. And you could see the glimpses starting to come out at that point of him, of where he was going, again, in terms of that becoming a veteran, becoming that vocal guy. And from the 4 years I've been on the beat, he kept true to his word. Throughout those 4 years, he became that guy. He was the one who basically all the newcomers, when they got up here, they were able to lean on as to figure out just how to find their way in the big leagues, what they need to do away from the field, in addition to how they'll get ready to be a big leaguer on game day. But right. I wish Miggy nothing but the best out there in LA. And if it comes down to a big play, we know he's probably going to be that 7th, 8th, 9th inning defensive replacement, the ball is more than likely going to find him.
Well,
wherever.
Yeah, not only that, and even in the lineup too. I mean, obviously he's going to a lineup with a lot more firepower, but that's going to allow him to hit 9th potentially. That's why at least some people have been projecting him where he's going to be. We saw what he could do at the bottom of the lineup. You know, that's perfect. I mean, he's that guy that could flip the lineup and keep innings going and that sort of thing. So if he's healthy, he's a solid role player addition to a loaded squad like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope he stays durable. I hope he stays healthy. Hopefully he got over, the little nicks that he had last year and is able to, for the most part, stay healthy throughout the season. And again, like you said, I got to know him from early on in his career. I got to do a nice story on him in the beginning, and then later on, the chance that I had to get to know his mom, rest in peace. And I'll never forget that trip to Chicago and, kind of spending time with her, developed a good friendship in her final years there. So again, to him and his family, I'm excited for his chance to go on and do something big, for in this next season. And, we'll see how long he's over there in LA.
Yeah. And now to shift back to the Marlins and how the trade impacts them, Marlins now have to figure out how they want to do their infield, because when they signed Jean Segura, the initial thought process was Miguel Rojas at shortstop, Jazz stays at second, Jean Segura at third, Wendell and Burry, basically lefty and righty roving infielders filling in on off days and whatnot. Now that Miggy's gone, it's looking like they're going to just insert Joey Wendell to be the primary shortstop and keep the rest of that plan in place. Jazz at second, Segura at third, Birdie as, again, that rotating utility option, and then throwing in one of the other prospects they have, either Jordan Groshans or Xavier Edwards, who they got from the Rays back in November, or potentially down the road, Jacob Amaya. And then, of course, the fact that Wendell can play all three of those spots. Segura can play all three of those spots. Jazz can play second or short. If they decide they want to shake things up, they have the options to basically move the pieces around. But it's looking like, at least to start the year, they want to keep Jazz at second because he played relatively well there when they've given him the extended playing time there over the last 2 years. And then Wendell and Segura keep that left side of the infield with two of your more higher end defenders. He only played about 200 or so innings at shortstop last year, but he still had 6 defensive runs saved. He showed that he could play there. It will be interesting to see how he does there in a more extended role. And same with Segura, who has primarily been a middle infielder in his career, but has said that he's comfortable at third. He's basically been repping there throughout the offseason. And that's going to be how he handles third will probably be one of the more deciding factors on how that infield defense looks.
Let's see. I mean, I think that's where just expect it to be, a lot of moving around again, like I would say position, maybe not positionless, but you know what I mean? Like positionless baseball to a certain degree, because you're going to have these guys moving around. I mean, where they're listed, they're all kind of out of their natural position, sort of, to a point. They're all like, with Jazz really probably should be the shortstop. Segura's not really like at third, like you said, what you just said about Wendell not really being primarily a shortstop, but they're just going to move them around, and it's going to be mix and match and put them in where they best feel on that day. They make the biggest contributions, and more importantly too, it's the bats. Can this lineup not be as brutal as it was last year? Can those guys contribute? Can they, produce runs?
Can they stay healthy?
Can they stay healthy primarily? I mean, that's a question for any team, but you can't fall back on that as a crutch too if injuries start piling up, because they happen all over the league. Different teams, we've had teams that have success in spite of injuries, so that's going to happen. But it's depth and versatility. Yes, I think they have that for sure. Do they have enough depth though? Because the other names you said are guys that are just starting their careers for the most part. So you're going to lean on that to be the second wave if injuries start piling up. We saw how that went last season. So that's where it could get a little scary. But again, I think that dynamic with how the clubhouse is going to be handled, again, you have some interesting topics to look at going into the season, in the sense of, let's see what a different shape this team takes.
Yeah. And then one area where they do have depth and got a little bit more of it, or will be getting more of it once it becomes official, they're starting pitching. They added Johnny Cueto. He's set to make $8.5 million this year and has a club option for 2024 for $10.5 million with a $2.5 million buyout if the option is not enacted. And Cueto turns 37 on February 15th, the day before pitchers and catchers report. We're a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting in Jupiter and spring training beginning in earnest. And just the quick look at Cueto, two-time All-Star, 2015 World Series winner with the Kansas City Royals, 3.44 ERA in his career going into year 16. And last year, 25 games, 158 in the third innings pitched with the Chicago White Sox, 3.35 ERA, 102 Ks against 33 walks in 25 outings. That included a complete game. And that was sort of a turning point to an upward trajectory for Cueto, because his last few years have been mired by injuries. It was his first year with at least 150 innings since 2016, which was the final year of 3 consecutive runs of at least 200 innings. Had Tommy John surgery, I think it was back in 2019. But with Cueto's addition, that gives the Marlins theoretically 7 guys for your starting rotation options as of right now. When you factor in Sandy Alcantara, Pablo Lopez, Edward Cabrera, Trevor Rogers, Jesus Luzardo, Braxton Garrett, and Cueto. So you got 7 guys theoretically for 5 spots, which is something you're going to need, especially when you look at the Marlins outside of Cueto, still a very young pitching staff. Everybody not named Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez dealt with injuries last year. And we know about Pablo's injury history prior to last year when he made every start. So whether they decide to keep all 7 and have it as a couple of the younger guys starting in AAA, and you have the quality depth that already has MLB experience in AAA, or you use the Cueto signing to say, hey, they're going to try to dangle either Pablo, Trevor, or Cabrera to get a bat, and this way you still have a 6th guy as an option.
That's the value.
Yeah, you have the value either way, whether it's keeping the pitching depth or being able to swing a trade and know that you're not completely compromising your top group.
Well, listen, this franchise still needs several steps to get to where it wants to get to. So I think that's the biggest value. And you wrote that when it happened, how the flexibility that now they might have, where you could move, any one of those guys that you talked about, you could move one of them if you can now, because you can afford to, assuming 37-year-old Johnny Cueto is more like 36-year-old Johnny Cueto and not the 3 years prior Johnny Cueto and getting hurt and not durable and that sort of thing. And that's the risk you're taking with this signing too. But let's say it does pan out. Yes, I think that we've said it to death how much this team needs to add pieces on the offensive side. So yes, I think that's where it creates an opening where now you move the pieces around. You say, okay, maybe now it doesn't hurt as bad if we move one of the other arms and get something in return to balance this out a little bit better. So that's still, I think, to me, at the end of the day, when you're looking big picture, that's the benefit of this move potentially if it works out.
Yeah, and it also could just be a potential stopgap for a guy like Gary Perez, depending on how well he progresses, how quickly he moves up.
Yeah.
Could just be a holdover until they feel Yuri's ready and gives them another option. And then you still have Max Meyer, who's out next year with Tommy John. You got Jake Eder, who they're hoping can rebound from his Tommy John surgery. He should be full go once spring starts. And then whatever the heck happens with Sixto Sanchez, who is still on this roster and hasn't done anything over the last 2 years. And it's just a matter of when does a decision have to be made with him? I got to talk with Nick Fortes over the weekend. He said he caught a Sixto Sanchez bullpen the other day. He looked fluid and loose were the 2 words that Fortes used. It's a positive sign. Let's see if it translates to actual game settings when spring starts. But at some point or another, the Marlins are going to have to figure out what they're doing with Sixto, or if he's going to be a viable option, whatever role it is, whether it's in the rotation as a reliever. If they can find some way to find some sort of value out of him, they time's running out to figure out what they're going to be able to do with him.
Yeah. Call me in March if he's on the mound and he's pitching okay and he's building up and he's progressing and all of that. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I saw tweets from you guys saying he was throwing from 45 feet and 60 and then back to 40 and all that last year, you know, like we want, hopefully he gets true progress this year, because I like that kid a lot. I liked it from the time they got him. It's a shame that the injury happened the way it did. And now you just hope you can get some semblance of the pitcher you had during that shortened season, you know, and go forward from there. But yeah, hopefully I'm saying it like that, but it's true. I mean, I think once I'm waiting for March and then April after that, and little by little, then I'll be, you know, he can look as fluid as he wants in just a little, you know, sim, whatever it was, you know, little throwing session, little pitching session there. But when he's actually building up and progressing and has no setbacks, then we'll be like, cross your fingers. Okay, good.
Exactly. Yep. And then on that note, we've talked about what they have acquired and now what they still need to address. And as we touched on, ideally at least one more bat. And the two main areas where you would look to pursue things are either at first base or in the outfield, because they have like 17 infielders, it feels like, on this 40-man roster that they feel like, again, they have the three regulars and then everybody else who they're trying to figure out as the backups. At first base, you have Garrett Cooper, and that's where the list ends right now.
Garrett Cooper.
Yeah, because right now their top two backup options, according to general manager Kim Ang, are Nick Fortes, who is one of your two primary catchers, who hasn't regularly played first base since his college days at Ole Miss, or Gerard Encarnacion, who is primarily a corner outfielder, who has played some first base in the minors the last couple seasons and played there at winter ball, but is still not a primary true first baseman. So Go ahead.
Because you gave up on Lewin Diaz and sent him into the twilight zone where he can't stop getting DFA'd. You know,
no, he cannot.
I mean,
I think we're at 5 DFAs over the last month, including twice by the Orioles. The Orioles picked him up 2 separate times.
Yeah. So you're wondering why you have no first baseman. I mean, now the poor kid can't land anywhere now, apparently. But I don't know. Gamble, because again, not the sturdiest, not the most durable either. Your one and only option there right now. And then again, some of the other guys you mentioned, like Gerard. Again, it's always the project. It's always the experiment, like risks again, especially at that spot. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, and this is another impact from the Rojas trade, because Rojas could have been a backup first baseman and been the guy to slide over there on days when needed.
That too. Yeah, which he did. Yeah, that's another guy too. But we'll see.
Yep. And then with the outfield, the way it's looking based off of who they have right now, which again, they haven't brought in anybody. So obviously, Garcia and right, De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez between center and left. Jorge Soler primarily is the designated hitter, especially since Cooper has to play every day at first base now, but can also slide over the left field as well. John Birdie can play in the outfield. Those are your main options in the outside of the kids, Gerard, Blade, Burdick, if they give them another chance. So if you look at between those two position groups, first base and outfield, the Marlins could potentially, there are trade options out there. They have had discussions with different teams. They've talked with the Red Sox about trying to get Tristan Casas, but we know that's going to take a lot to get. And the thing is, this is where I thought the Rojas trade could have gone in, because they need infield depth, especially with Trevor Story hurt, and they need starting pitching. So that's where you could have tried to combo a Rojas or a Wendell with a Lopez or a Trevor to try to start the deal. But now that you took Rojas out of that equation, it kind of, you have to figure out things to go there. And they were already having a high asking price for Casas as it was, which is completely understandable with the type of player Tristan Casas is. A couple of the other options they have discussed with the Minnesota Twins, both outfielder Max Kepler and first baseman Luis Arraez. Pablo Lopez, I believe, is the centerpiece on that one in terms of discussions. And then elsewhere, St. Louis Cardinals could always use pitching, and they have some outfielders they could choose to dangle. Switch hitter Dylan Carlson, right-hander Tyler O'Neill, lefty Lars Nootbaar, especially since they have their top prospect Jordan Walker is an outfielder and close to being big league ready. That could be another area. And the Marlins had some pretty good success the last time they did a big trade with the Cardinals. So they could try to bounce back to that as well.
I want Lars Nootbaar. And that's mainly just because I want to say Lars Nootbaar all year. Have a Lars Nootbaar, please. Let's get him down here. I just want that name. Yeah. You wanted Tristan Casas? Guess what? They should have drafted him in 2018. Then you'd have Tristan Casas. I can't. I honestly bravo if you could convince the Red Sox to get him down here, but it would surprise me from that end of it that why would the Red Sox give up on him so quickly? I mean, unless I'm missing something. Again, I don't cover the Red Sox. I don't know, but it would be a heck of a steal if you could somehow create enough of a package to get him there, because then you're good at first for a while potentially. I like that kid a lot. I thought I still to this day I wish they would have that would have been the pick about to be 5 years ago pretty soon.
Yep. Yeah. And again, we'll see what goes on from there. We're a month away from spring training, pitchers and catchers. So the schedule is pitchers and catchers who are going to be in the World Baseball Classic are reporting on the February 13th. The rest of the pitchers and catchers are reporting on February 16th, and the team's first full squad workout scheduled for February 21st. So we're a month away, Dre. It's hard to believe that we're already here.
It's sneaking up, and this spring, as we all know, 3 little letters are going to make it even more exciting. You know what those 3 little letters are? They're coming to Lone Depot Park in March, and gonna fill that place.
WBC.
Oh yeah,
WBC baby.
I am excited for that, and I think that's going to be. We know it's been an event every time it's been in Miami, but this year especially, having the later rounds and the championship, but the champion to be crowned in Miami. That's awesome, and I can't wait to see that. There are going to be some battles. There are going to be some battles when some of those countries square off, even in the first round. We're going to see a few.
Night 1, we get Dominican Republic and Venezuela.
Yeah, night 1.
Astra Bear night 1.
Yeah, we're still putting in that petition for the Sandy Pablo game, Sandy Pablo matchup. But we'll see what the managers decide. But that'd be pretty special if they could swing it, especially in their ballpark. That'd be fun.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be great to do. We're going to have a decent amount of WBC coverage leading up to everything starting there. First game in Lone Depot Park is March 11th, and it goes basically right until the end of spring training. We'll be there. We'll be at both sites in Jupiter and in Miami as all this goes on. It's going to be busy time. It's going to be a fun time, and we will be getting there soon. But until then, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Fish Bytes. I'm Jordan McPherson. He's Andre Fernandez. Thanks so much, everyone.